What's up, guys? I am so super excited to share this video with you today. This is the very first sign that we were actually paid to make. Up until now, we have really just been gathering a bunch of different ideas for signs that we want to make, trying out different techniques, and really sorting through a bunch of different supplies to find out the ones that work the best for us. But this sign is the first baby that's actually going to be living in a brand new home. I am absolutely thrilled with how it came out, and I cannot wait to share this process with you. So let's dive in. The first thing we need to do is get our template printed for the scroll saw. I do all of my designing in Photoshop, so once it's done, I just save it as a JPEG file, and then it is ready for printing. I actually filmed this entire process but didn't want this video to go any longer than necessary, so I took it out. If you are interested in how I design from scratch in Photoshop, let me know in the comments down below so I can get it on the channel for you. Once the file is saved to your computer, you are going to need to open it in Acrobat Reader. Go to the little printer icon on the left-hand side, click, and then when the screen comes up, you're going to go to the poster option. You will see in the preview that this puts the design on multiple pages that we are going to put together in just a second. Then just click print. When the pages are printed, you're going to get something that looks like this with little gaps in between. I've seen other makers not add in this extra step, but for me, I just feel like it's going to be a lot more precise if I cut off the edges, and then I'm able to scroll exactly what I need to without any question. So using this straight edge cutting tool, I just trim off all of the gaps so the design will all line up properly. This is what it looks like all cut and taped up. Then, to make things easier to work with on the scroll saw, I just trim around the main designs. Now we need to get the design onto the material that you're cutting. Because I want the sign multi-dimensional, one of the best ways to achieve that is with stack cutting. This is a great time-saving tip. To protect the surfaces from the adhesive, you're going to want to add a layer of masking tape or contact paper. Take your first layer and cover it up with your tape. Painter's tape works as well. Then you will take some adhesive spray. I love this 3M one, and I'm going to go ahead and link that down below for you. Spray it all over the masking tape or even directly on the back of your template. Then place your second layer of material on top of that. One more round of masking tape to protect this surface. More spray adhesive, then you can place your template on. When cutting things out on the scroll saw, you are going to need to drill a little hole into the inner portions of things like letters. This allows you to easily get the blade in. I just grabbed a little drill bit, my DeWalt drill, and the battery, of course. I love having cordless tools. They make everything so much more handy. Basically, you'll find all the center areas that need to be cut out, and then you're going to drill a little hole into them. Then you can fit the blade right through, load it onto the scroll saw, and you are ready to cut. So this project was actually cut on the Wen scroll saw, and if you caught my last video, you know that I am not a fan of this scroll saw. It made things really difficult. Blades kept bending and breaking. The tension was all over the place. Really not happy with it, but we have a new scroll saw in the workshop, and it's a total game changer. I cannot wait to share it with you. What should have taken me a couple of hours at most ended up taking me double the amount of time because the saw really is not my favorite. Once you have all of your pieces cut out, the magic can begin. Just pull your pieces of material apart, then you're going to take the template and tape off. Depending on the style of piece you're making, you may decide that leaving the crisp edges is better, but for the most part, this shaping step really helps bring things to life. You'll just need a little rotary tool for this. I grabbed this one right on Amazon. I think it was around $20 or $25, and I was pleasantly surprised with how powerful it is. I normally stick it on the very first speed setting, and I think it goes up 10 more. I couldn't even imagine like what that would do. But for the most part, I really love this rotary, and it was super inexpensive. My favorite bit for shaping are these little sanding drums. This really lets you sand down things very, very quickly. Just go along all of the edges and try to round them out uniformly. The other attachment that I really love for shaping are these little sanding discs. They aren't quite as aggressive as the sanding drums, but they really give a nice finish to the pieces. The last step for shaping is to really finish it off with some fine grit sandpaper. For smaller pieces like this, I like using this little micro sander. This I also bought on Amazon. I think it came in a 2-pack, but you can also find them at Lowe's and Home Depot. Sanding is by far the most time-consuming part of any of these wood sign projects. But I also love this step because it is so methodical and brainless. There is honestly no better therapy than using a scroll saw and sanding. With the letters and designs all scrolled out, it was now time to bring it to life with some paint. We have been testing out a lot of different spray paints and painting techniques, but honestly, the one that we keep coming back to with the best finish, we got right from, I think it's called bombingscience.com, and I love these spray paints. They go on so buttery smooth. But before we get the paint on, we need to get primer on everything. I love this Rust-Oleum filler primer. If you're a maker, I'm sure you have already heard about it, but I swear it is liquid gold. It really does provide a great base for the paints, and it also helps fill in any little small gaps or imperfections in your material. You're gonna wanna coat everything, and I mean really coat it, like smother it. Then let it completely dry. I usually let my filler primer dry completely for about 24 hours. I have tried painting pieces within the 24 hours, and for some reason it never ever comes out. It always has this like weird bubbling, the finish isn't as smooth, so now I just make sure that I give myself the full 24 hours for it to dry completely. Once your primer is dry, you're going to go over everything with a little bit of fine grit sandpaper. This really just ensures that everything is completely buttery smooth. I'll typically hit it with another coat of filler primer as well, but a much, much lighter coat. Let this round dry again, make sure the finish is nice and smooth, then it's time to paint. Make sure you hit every angle, the sides, the tops, and in between the letters as well. 24 hours later, you are one step closer to finishing your piece. Next, it was time to make our backer. When I designed this piece, I already knew from the very beginning that I was going to be using shiplap. There's just something about the white shiplap against the wood with all the colors popping. For some reason, it just really screamed nautical theme to me. While Joe cut the backer, I started on the shiplap. I just measured for each board, marked the cut, then we ran it through the table saw. Clearly, we needed to change our blade before we started this project because, as you can see, some of the edges kind of splintered up and did not have a nice finish to it. But it's nothing that a little sandpaper can't fix. I just grabbed our orbital sander and some 220 grit sandpaper to finish the edges off. Once it was nice and smooth, I glued each plank down. First, I laid out all the pieces to make sure it all fit properly, then grabbed my glue and got everything stuck down. To evenly space out shiplap, I normally use a little coin to put into the gaps to make them all uniform. Once the glue was dry, it was time to get a coat of white paint on the shiplap. Nothing fancy here, this is just the same paint we used on the walls in the garage makeover. Next step in the sign process is the glue down, and I have to say this is my least favorite part of the entire process. The anticipation, the anxiety, one little move, one little shift in a letter with glue or overspilling, and you could honestly like ruin your entire piece and have to start all over. Fortunately though, this went off without a single hitch. Making sure everything is straight and lined up is the most difficult part. Normally what I've been doing is adding some painter's tape as a guide. I use a large level to make sure it's straight, then lay it back down once the tape is on. Then it's just a matter of spacing the letters and pieces on properly. Once I think I have it, I take a couple of pictures from overhead. This will let me change perspective a little bit and catch things I may not have seen otherwise. Then I can just go back and adjust as needed. With everything in place, it was finally time to glue it all down. I have really been loving this Tite Bond quick and thick glue for my indoor signs. I get it right from Home Depot or Lowe's, but Amazon has it as well, of course. One by one, down the line, each letter gets adhered, then I did the anchor. For thinner areas like this, I like to use a Q-tip to smooth the glue out, which helps avoid any kind of spillover. And last but not least, I decided to actually add a frame to this sign. I really feel like framing just finishes the piece off and makes it look that much more professional. Instead of making a really simple sign where the corners are kind of overlapped, I decided that I wanted to do a rabbited edge for the trim pieces. This just makes it look so much more polished, in my opinion. I used this maple trim from Home Depot. I marked just a bit over halfway, then set up the table saw to the depth of the backer. Then you're going to need to turn the trim on its side to cut out the piece. Raise the blade on the table saw just until it hits the first cut. You're going to do this along the entire edge of your trim pieces. Next, it's time to get those perfectly mitered corners. This step can be so frustrating, but I promise practice makes perfect. This might be overkill, but I mark anything and everything that I can to help guide me on the miter. First, I like to make a little guide to show where the angle needs to be cut at. Then I lay the trim on the backer and mark where the cut should be. This is where having the guide for the angle is super helpful. I know exactly which way I need to turn the miter saw for the proper cut. Then I look for where the cut needs to be and I chop away. You'll need to do this on all 4 sides of your sign. Once the framing is all cut, I just stain the wood using this dark walnut color. I think I did a couple of coats to make sure it was nice and dark. Then when it was all dry, I went ahead and glued everything into place. I love using these little corner clamps to hold all of the pieces together. We also added some finishing nails to make sure that the framing is secured properly. The finishing touches really made this sign come to life. I happened to be in the dollar store looking for some contact paper, and this rope caught my eye. I immediately thought it would be the perfect addition to this nautical sign. After some cutting and adjustments, and Joe needing to throw his 2 cents in and being denied, it was in place and ready to get glued down. And my first sign for a real customer is officially completed, and I couldn't be more happy with how it turned out. I love the dimension, I love the colors, I love how simple and clean it is. I'm pretty impressed with my first real sign, if I do say so myself. Alrighty, that's a wrap. My first paid piece, and I can't tell you how excited I am to get back into the workshop to make more signs. I hope you enjoyed seeing this process, and I honestly cannot wait to show you more. If you happen to want any tutorials on designing, on Photoshop, questions on printing, or anything else, please be sure to leave me a comment down below and let me know. I would love to tackle them all for you. Until then, we'll see you next week.